Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about bisexual slash pansexual men in Big Brother USA history. Honestly, by the time I finish recording this and editing this, I might include Canada because there are not a whole lot of bisexual or pansexual men in Big Brother USA in general. So, because of that, I might have to include some from Canada, just depending on how long this video is and the content I have of the bisexual men on Big Brother. And just from the people that I've been able to put on the list, what's interesting is a lot of them weren't out of the closet by the time they were cast, or they didn't know. So technically, they're cast as a straight person on the show. And this is always hard because sexuality is not really visible, or you can't really immediately tell someone's sexuality just by looking at them, and while you might have some vibes, nothing can really be confirmed. So it makes this harder. And I think in general, bisexuality is such a hard thing to portray and discuss and to cast for on reality TV, especially. So I think that led to the invisibility here. Since I know this will come up later, Kylan is not in the video because he has recently stated that he is straight, and he said this various times. Since I know he tweeted before his time on Big Brother that he was pansexual, but he apparently stated that he didn't really know what that was, or he didn't comprehend or understand it, so he now identifies as straight, so he will not be on this list. So the first person in Big Brother history to be a bisexual man is Dustin from Big Brother 8. I find him to be very interesting compared to the other bisexual men who have been on the show for a variety of reasons. One is that the real reason why he was cast was due to his relationship with his ex-boyfriend Joe, so they really wanted to focus on his relationship with men, since it was the main reason why he was cast, since Joe was the original applicant and Dustin was obviously recruited via Joe, unbeknownst to him. A lot of the drama showed up with the two of them during the limited time they were in the house together, where Joe revealed that Dustin allegedly gave him gonorrhea within minutes of meeting the cast, and Dustin denied it. Overall, it was a really nasty exchange, and this will be used against him later on in the season. Joe and Dustin really had no interest in making up with one another, not for game reasons or personal reasons, but Dustin was able to be free once Joe was evicted in week 2. It was interesting that they wanted to capture this relationship between two LGBT people, which is something that took a very long time to get, since this was the 8th year that Big Brother USA has been on. We barely see two gay people interact on the show in general, even after 23 to 24 years, and having a gay man and a bisexual man who were in a romantic relationship with one another at some point was such a great thing to do and see, but I also feel like it was a missed opportunity, since we didn't really focus much onto that element of things. Dustin reveals to the house guests throughout the season that he does have a girlfriend, so he was very openly bisexual. This is rare, especially for men, since quite a few of them were either closeted in their BB experiences or actively avoided to label themselves, and I'm also including Canada with this as well. At the same time, it really was not acknowledged much on the episodes, and for a show that loves talking about and showing different and diverse identities, I really do think they dropped the ball with not letting Dustin speak about his bisexual experience slash identity on the episodes. But I think it's an issue with the portrayal of bisexual people, especially men in general, on not only Big Brother, but reality TV, where it is very hidden. During Dustin's final week of the season, he was berated by Evil Dick, since Amber promised Dick Dustin's vote to boot Eric over Kale in the prior week, which Dustin did not live up to. Dick was riling everyone up in the house, and what he used against Dustin was his sexuality. And he made fun of Dustin for engaging in sodomy, claims that Joe was not lying about Dustin giving him and having STIs, and a bunch of other homophobic slurs. So he kind of got treated like a gay man in the house, despite him being bisexual. And that's not very common for the other bisexual men on the show, though that's for a variety of reasons that we will get into once we discuss those other people. So, shockingly, we only have to wait another season in order to get our next bisexual male Big Brother house guest, and that is James from Big Brother 9. What is interesting about James is that his sexuality came into place or became a sticking point due to stuff outside of the house instead of the stuff inside the house. Like I mentioned about Parker being cast as a straight person despite being gay in the video about gay men for this season, James was cast as a straight man as well, since it put him on the cast to be tied to a romantically or potentially due to the theme of the season. It doesn't seem like James told the producers about his sexuality whatsoever, and once the cast was revealed, people quickly did their digging as they do for every single season where a cast was revealed, and they found his how do I say this? Acting that involves corn, if you know what I mean, and it was with other men. Obviously, there are people who engage in corn being a man involving other men and are straight, but that doesn't seem to be the case with James. He did state after the season ended that he is a bisexual man, so he wasn't just a gay for pay, corn person, if you know what I mean. So he does have an attraction towards men. And he also stated that he didn't mention it in the house, and I believe he didn't mention it because he said that he was scared of how people would react since he didn't know if people would be homophobic or not and treat him badly based on their homophobia. So that was a huge worry for him at the time, and it sucks that he had to hold himself back and to retain a huge part of his identity because he feared people would be homophobic towards him. And I think that's the case with some of the latter men as well. So he essentially had to be closeted in the house. And especially with the twist of the season being romantic pairs, I'm pretty sure that played a part in it as well. I also remember that James had a bunch of tattoos all over his body that involves the nudity of humans. I don't recall if it was just men, women, or both genders that were tattooed on his body. But either way, production had to blurt out these tattoos on their episodes, and they were really pissed off when his history was revealed online. James always seemed like an outsider regarding the other men on the season, no matter what he did. Maybe it was the pink mohawk hair that did him in, or the other oddities about him, but I did find it interesting that his closest male ally was Joshua, who is gay. They didn't show any conversations between them about their sexualities on the show, and I don't recall if those conversations ever happened on the feeds. Anyways, James did engage in a showmance with Chelsea very early on in the season, and they apparently had a lot of intercourse very publicly throughout the house. His experience compared to Dustin's just in the prior season was very different, as in a way he was treated as a straight man, while Dustin was treated as a gay man, though neither of them are either sexually, clearly. So, unlike some of the people I will be talking afterwards, James knew and identified as a bisexual man within himself, but he was closeted in the house. But the fact that he identified as bisexual in the house, or by this time in his life, shows a difference compared to some of the others that we're going to be talking about very soon. So we're skipping and moving on 6 years and 7 seasons until we get our next bisexual man on Big Brother, and that is Zach from Big Brother 16. Now that we are on Zach, there's a lot to talk about, but I honestly don't even know where to really start. It is clear that Zach was cast as a straight man since he identified as a straight man at the time during the season and mentioned how he was only attracted to women. Though he would state many times if he was attracted to guys, he would be attracted to Frankie, though he said it in a joking way, though in hindsight, it clearly wasn't joking. He got close to Frankie very early on in the season, as they both were loud personalities who had a sense of humor about things and really bonded as friends. There have been many different close friendships between the men on Big Brother USA, but there was always something special about these two, which fans and fellow house guests noticed. The two of them ended up cuddling with one another, flirting with one another, and were teetering on that borderline regarding being a showman, though of course Zach was very hesitant. Of course, feelings got involved, and Zach got very emotional and attached to Frankie, though Frankie never saw how useful Zach was on a gameplay point of view. Frankie always felt like Zach was such a huge liability, which is why he was fine with Zach going in week 2 when Devin was pushing it, and it was why on a game sense, he always kept Zach at a distance, and was willing to throw Zach under the bus several times. Of course, we had there several fallouts throughout the season, with Frankie throwing his alliance under the bus especially, and Zach took it very personally, to the point where he had that infamous rant in the diary room about how Frankie's going to give money to kids in Africa, give them the effing money, I want to quit, and he just went on and on and on. And he was a lot more emotional than everyone else, and it was clear that there was something more there, but people didn't really want to speculate, and the ones that did speculate went too far with it. And by they, I'm referring to the fans at the time. The season officially ended with Frankie sending Zach home on his HOH as they intentionally set Zach up when the few non-allies of the detonators were safe. Of course, there was the mess that happened after the season, where Zach denied at the time that there was anything going on with Frankie, and the Zanky stands postseason really overwhelmed him and were psychotic, to the point where he had several meltdowns and rants about them. As we all know, Zach definitely had a mental breakdown as his clout from Big Brother grew, and he got himself into a lot of trouble, where he would eventually state that he regrets being on the show. Many years later, I believe in 2020, Zach admits that he and Frankie did hook up after the season, and they were messing around for quite a bit, but things did end between them, and it didn't seem like they ended on the best terms. He revealed that he's bisexual and had to come to the realization of this while playing Big Brother, which was very overwhelming since you're going through this process where you're coming to terms with things regarding your sexuality that you either didn't know or fought really hard to push away, and you're dealing with this on a microscope where millions of people are watching you, not only just on the episodes, but on live feeds as well, and are adding their commentary. He mentioned that he thought it was just a Frankie situation, with him just being attracted to Frankie, but then he hooked up with another man, and he wanted to inspire others about being open regarding being bisexual, especially since there's always a stigma about men being bisexual, especially compared to women being bisexual. Zach is now engaged to a woman, and he seems to have done a great turnaround regarding his mental health and how he views the show now. He also said that he is a bisexual who leans towards women, which makes sense based on him being engaged to a woman. And he had the dilemma of realizing that he liked both parts of a man and a woman, and there are definitely some bisexual people, apparently it's a decent amount, who have a slight preference for one gender over the other, or they sexually and romantically like one gender, but either only sexually like the other gender or only sexually like the other one romantically. So I guess he's bisexual who likes women more than men. So we move on 2 years and 2 seasons to Paulie from Big Brother 18. So Big Brother 18 was one of the first seasons that I followed online heavily from the very beginning regarding the pre-season press. I remember the cast being revealed and people very quickly finding photos and pictures of Paulie that were very homoerotic. Pictures of him in Speedos, wrapping his legs around another man, and other salacious photo shoots, and his buttocks pretty much just being out the door and exposed. But people kind of just moved on from it, since many BB men in the past did homoerotic modeling shoots, but some people thought that he was a little saucy, and some of the stuff we found of him preseason weren't modeling shoots or videos. Anyways, the season starts, and I remember he had a lot of hostility towards Josiah, where he threatened violence on Josiah several times and acted like he was the worst person ever. And while people were generally annoyed with Josiah in the house, they never had the same hostility that Paulie did. Based on how they're a lot more similar nowadays, And I've seen some very flirtatious pictures and videos of them. Maybe there is some potential repression there. Anyways, he gets into a romance with Zakia and things seem fine enough, but there was a sense that he was getting bored and tired of her, which caused him to trust her to many different people in the house and would cause arguments between them, where he started to resent her a lot. This was during the time that he got very close to Paul. And Zakia definitely made several comments about the interactions between the two Pauls, and she was kind of jealous about it. He would avoid Zakia wanting to sleep with him in the same bedroom, to sleep in the same bed as Paul, especially during Paul's HOH, threw her under the bus because she suggested targeting Paul, which actually would have been good for him in hindsight. Paulie even started talking the same way as Paul did, and even wore his outfits, where several people in the house noticed it and found it to be very odd. And even the edit kind of made fun of him for it, and Paul threw his little jabs there as well. It was clear that he had a crush on Paul and was genuinely hurt on his final week where Paul turned on him in a way that he didn't react at all to anyone, and he kind of had an emotional breakdown during his final week for a variety of reasons. Of course, there was the start of his meltdown where he started attacking all of the women and showing off his brute masculinity, and his energy was so weird. Even during this conversation with Natalie that caused them to be partners on the final reckoning and their argument, they're talking about how they both flirt with a bunch of different people, but you could also read into it where they're both almost trying to prove their heterosexuality, since both of them were accusing the other of being disingenuous with their showman's partners on that season. And a lot of people commented about how they both seem to be more bonded to people of the same sex on their seasons. Anyways, Paulie was clearly cast as a straight man, and he got into a romance with a woman, and he also mentioned his pre-game press that he planned to be a womanizing flirt. There are a lot more signs on the challenge, where people made fun of his tight, revealing clothing that showed off his great body, and he wore a lot of booty shorts, which people kind of talked about. His continued aggression just got even worse on there, and then he ended up kissing slash licking Theo in front of his girlfriend. And it seemed like she kind of knew about Paulie's ways, and she herself, Cara Maria, is bisexual as well. He eventually came out last year and kind of rationalized his aggression and violence on reality TV as a result of this, trying to be masculine and supposedly trying to figure out whether he was attracted to men or not. And there are definitely signs, and it all makes sense. And he's definitely living it up in more recent years. And you could even tell by his clothing compared to how he was on Big Brother, where they kind of give you clothing and they make you dress a certain way, and to how he even dressed on the challenge and how he dresses now and how he started dyeing his hair. He was definitely becoming a lot less, I don't want to say gender normative, but he wasn't dressing as the most masculine way, or a quote unquote masculine way, and he started dressing a lot more flamboyantly over the years. Where now he just kind of dresses however he wants. Sometimes he'll wear quote unquote masculine clothes, and sometimes he'd wear clothes that are very flamboyant and shows off his curves, I guess. So, yeah. I also just remembered that he stated that Frankie Grande was one of the people who helped him come to terms with his sexuality. How? I have no idea, but I found that to be an interesting comment and an interesting connection, especially since Zach said the very same thing. But the fact is, he was closeted during the season. I don't know if he knew he was bisexual then and didn't divulge it, which wouldn't be shocking, or he generally didn't know at the time, but he clearly felt like he had a lot to prove, and it resulted in his very weird behavior that people really couldn't conceptualize at the time properly. And the final bisexual man on Big Brother USA is Turner at Big Brother 24. And of course, we had to wait 6 years in order to get another one. So he's the first openly bisexual man on Big Brother USA since Dustin, which was 15 years ago by this point in Big Brother history, and that's a very sad thing to say. From my recollection, Turner told a few people about this during the first few days of the season that he was bisexual, and now that I'm thinking about it, this could have happened with some of the prior examples I listed, but there are no feeds for the first few days of the season, which there were in Big Brother 24, and they might have divulged it earlier on when they knew that there are no feeds because they knew that people wouldn't be watching and they wouldn't feel judged. Pretty much all the guys that Turner told this to accepted him immediately and extremely well, and it was never really an issue, which is progress compared to someone like James, who was scared to tell people that he was bisexual due to the reasons I covered in his section. You can definitely tell that there was some comfortable flirting commentary slash humor from him with some of the guys on the season, especially Monty, but it was all joking and no one took it seriously. We actually do have a segment that aired on the episodes where he talks about his sexuality and his journey growing up. And honestly, there has never actually been someone, especially a man, that did this in Big Brother, where it was put on the episodes and he was able to thoroughly talk about his experience, as Dustin just briefly mentioned that he had a girlfriend during his season. Turner talked about how he never saw anyone else like him on TV and on the show specifically, and is hoping that him being on the show will help normalize bisexual men in media. There was a whole LGBT alliance or what have you with Michael, where they agreed to protect one another due to this, which I believe was brought up during Michael's last week in the house, but then Turner ended up sending Michael home like a few days later on his HOH after Monte pushed him to do so, which Turner really didn't want to do at first. And Michael definitely held it against him, where it became a little tiff between them. It was a dynamic between a bisexual man and a gay man that we haven't really seen explored on the show, though it barely got focused on here. And of course, Turner talked about his then girlfriend, now fiance, thoroughly on the season, and it's nice that he was able to have a woman who's able to accept him as bisexual, which isn't really the case in a lot of situations. Honestly, I was dabbling as to whether I should include Big Brother Canada into this video, but honestly, since there are such few people who are either bisexual or pansexual on the franchise, I thought I might as well include them. Especially once we get to the ratio compared to the woman, which I will get to eventually. So, the first person from Big Brother Canada who is pansexual, I believe, is Kyle. Honestly, he wasn't in the house for long, but people thought he was very arrogant. They thought that he was way too cocky, and he didn't fit in the house, which says a lot because Kenny and Andrew were in the house, and the fact that he couldn't even get along with them showed a huge problem, especially when those two were definitely seen as douchey as well. He was kind of stuck with the outsiders in Paul and Adele, and he saw things a lot differently compared to the others, and he had a more open mind when it came to certain things. So maybe that was one of the reasons why he was so different and he didn't fit in with the house. Apparently, he came out as pansexual a few years after his show, which is why he is on here, despite me not really having much to say about him. So, a big one that I'm discussing is Kevin from Big Brother Canada 3 and Big Brother Canada 5. So, right from the very beginning, he had a hard time getting along with the guys, as they just didn't like or trust him very much, and he honestly didn't feel very comfortable with them either. But the person he did get very close to was Johnny. Apparently, they flirted a bit here and there, and Johnny really got attached to Kevin since he sensed a vibe from Kevin, though Kevin didn't really feel the same and admitted that he was kind of flirting for gameplay purposes. They had discussions, and he claimed that he doesn't like labels regarding his sexuality, and it's based on how he feels. And just from the way that he was describing it at the time, it seemed like he was trying to avoid officially stating that he was bisexual or pansexual, especially during this period. And a lot of people who say that they quote unquote don't like labels tend to avoid it because they don't want to have the stigma of what the label that they would fit under and what that requires and the baggage of it. And people who generally say that they don't like labels, it's kind of ridiculous because literally everything in the world is labeled. And if things aren't labeled, we wouldn't know what they are and we wouldn't be able to categorize and make sense of it all. So anyways, Kevin kind of like threw Johnny under the bus and tossed him to the wolves, and he also had a showmance turned into a real man's with Polar, where they were very cute and they kind of isolated themselves from everyone else as they mainly just focused on one another. And you really saw them fall in love. And it's kind of sad that I'm talking about this because as I'm recording this, Kevin and Polar are now getting a divorce, as they were the first Big Brother couple, or Big Brother Canada couple, to ever get married, and they're now, not only are they the first Big Brother Canada couple to get a divorce, but they're the first Big Brother couple in North American history to get a divorce. But anyways, we're going to move on to Big Brother Canada 5. And this season happened when he and Pilar were on a break. So he was single entering the season, though he still had a lot of baggage from his relationship with Pilar. So Kevin kind of started doing the same thing again here that he did in Big Brother Canada 3, pertaining some of the gay men. Though he was a lot more, I don't want to say aggressive, but he was a lot more forward with his movements here, as he had a heavy flirtment with Gary, and they might have done a bit more, but Gary ended up leaving early, so that didn't culminate into anything too heavy. But the main thing regarding Kevin and this season is his relationship with William, where they really got comfortable with one another, they really started flirting with one another, and they got really close. And Kevin could act like it was all gameplay, but it really wasn't. Because you don't need to blow someone for gameplay. You don't need to jerk someone off for gameplay, and he was doing a lot of that, and he was initiating it. And yet again, he tried to avoid certain labels and certain conversations pertaining to his sexuality, even though he was engaging in romantic antics with a man on national television. And he fought so hard to not call it a showmance, though there were showmances that were a lot more fake and a lot less sincere than this one that were called a showmance. And I feel like people, especially the fans, didn't want to call this a showmance because they didn't want to call a relationship with two men a showmance. And because Kevin, I don't know if he's straight presenting or because he had a girlfriend or who was on the show, and he was so adamant on not calling it him and William a showmance, people kind of just stuck onto that, and I think a layer of that is definitely by erasure, especially since when certain men, they have fun with a man, they don't want to call it romantic, they don't want to call it sexual, they want to put a limit on it, and they try to define it as, oh, I meant nothing. So if they do that same thing with a woman, it's a showmance, it's a romance, it's blah blah blah, and all that jazz. So after Kevin wins the season, and in the year since, he has been more accepting with calling himself bisexual. So I'm glad he finally was able to have that come to Jesus moment where he can finally admit it. And what's interesting about Kevin is that this is the first time we really saw a bisexual man interact romantically with a woman and a man, and we saw that process where he was going through the motions with people of both genders, as we don't even have that on Big Brother USA. As I mentioned there, the people there were either completely closeted, or they only had the interaction with a man in Zach's case, or they just didn't do much of anything. So Kevin was definitely a unique person regarding this conversation and bisexuals in Big Brother Canada. Now I am looking at the list of bisexual slash pansexual men in BBUSA compared to the bisexual slash pansexual women in BBUSA, and there's a stark difference. One is that there are a lot more women than men, so I don't know if they find it easier to cast bisexual or pansexual women compared to bisexual men. And even if you look at the women, literally all but one of them were out at the time that they were on Big Brother, while for the men, literally 40% of them were closeted. Actually, no, 60% of them were closeted, and there are only 2 out of the 5 that were actively open. So I believe this is the case because, in my opinion, there's a stronger stigma of biphobia with men compared to women. Where with women, people may accept them being bisexual a bit more easily, though there are some other issues that I'll get into in that video. Where for men, a lot of people stupidly believe that if a man is bisexual, it's really just a one step towards being gay, or that they're undercover gay men and just using bisexual as an easy shield. So I think that's why more men who are bisexual in general are closeted, and I think that partially is why the men in Big Brother were closeted compared to not closeted, because they knew there was a stronger stigma attached to bisexuality with men than women, as they would automatically be assumed as gay, even if they are with women. And honestly, I kind of believe this is the case due to a lot of the damage that down low gay men have done. And unfortunately, bisexual men get caught in the crossfire in that regard. So when I look at the 5 bisexual men, none of them are pre-jurors, so that's definitely good. And all but one of them were endgamers. Actually, no, all but 2 of them were endgamers, since James is an endgamer since he made it to 6th. So, from the very, 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 very small sample size we have, they generally do okay enough, and they're never early boots. So, James in BB9, his first eviction probably would have been a pre-juror boot had he not had the returning twist. So Dustin was the first juror on a season, and he would have made it a lot further had the America's Player twist not affected things, so he was definitely twist screwed, as he would have definitely made it a few rounds further at the very minimum, had that happened. And if his power structure stayed the same, which it would have without all the twist, he probably would have been an endgamer. I already discussed James, as he would have been a pre-juror had the returning twist not happened, and the way they formatted the returning twist, where they only knew who he was compared to the other option of the returning twist was. But that was because his side of the house did have power at first, but they kind of fumbled it and they lost out during James's final week. And while he did come back in the house, he had to win several competitions to even make it to 6, and he lost most of his allies along the way. Zach was a part of the Bomb Squad and Detonators Alliance, which definitely did carry him through a lot of the season, where most of the people not in the alliance were booted, but he was always at the bottom of his alliance, where his alliance thought about evicting him, where they thought about evicting him in the 2nd week, and they were evicting him in the 6th week until a last minute flip happened that had nothing to do with him. Paulie was in a power position throughout most of his time on the season, as he was able to infiltrate into the 8 alliance. A lot of people wanted to work with him. He had a structure very well tight knit. He was making other allies with people like Paul and later on Victor. He created a guys alliance, and he did very well in the competitions, and he seemed like a front runner. But his emotions and his need for vengeance and revenge on people and his emotional gameplay during the jury portion got him out. And then we have Turner, who definitely was not in a good position during the beginning of the season, as his alliance was seen as fake by most of the people who were in it. He didn't really know what was going on. He lost his closest ally very quickly, and he would have been the next boot had he not won the next HOH. And while he did get into the Leftovers alliance, he was generally a follower, where he followed everything Kyle said, and then once Kyle was booted, he followed everything Monty said. But it got him to 3rd place. So, I discussed the disparity between bisexual men and bisexual women on BBUSA, and it is so much worse on Big Brother Canada, as there are even less bisexual or pansexual men on Big Brother Canada compared to the amount of bisexual or pansexual women in Big Brother Canada. And it says a lot because there's such a smaller sample size with Canada, just due to the fact that they are a decade behind in seasons compared to BBUS, but the fact that things are so much more imbalanced clearly shows the issue, where it is easier for them to cast bisexual or pansexual women compared to bisexual or pansexual men. And when we really look at the bisexual or pansexual men on Big Brother Canada, they really weren't that open. Cal wasn't open on the season and he came out some years later, and Kevin was actively trying to avoid labeling himself, so he didn't really want to be a part of any group or identification, which is something that I already covered. So none of them really embraced their status while they were in the house. And with Kevin, whenever he did engage with men, he tried to play it off like it was just for gameplay purposes, though we generally know that he's a pretty bad strategist. For a franchise or for a country of a franchise that prides so much on being inclusive and diverse in their casting and their messaging, they have a lot of work to do when it comes to bisexual men. Though I think a part of this still has to do with the stigma that bisexual men specifically have, where people automatically assume that they are gay just because they have attraction to men, ignoring their attraction to women even if they are with women. So I feel like a lot of bisexual men are closeted, and it affects the way that casting is done on shows like Big Brother USA and Big Brother Canada. So I can't be too hard on casting in this regard, though I do think that they could do a lot better. And it also shows when it comes to the representation of bisexuality in media, they generally would prefer that representation to be a woman rather than a man. And the same thing goes for pansexual representation as well. So, in conclusion, they have a lot more work to do when it comes to bisexual men. And though while I do think they are somewhat handicapped due to the stigmas of a lot of bisexual men being closeted, they could easily put more effort than casting 5 people, which was by accident because a decent amount of them were closeted at the time in BBUSA history and only 2 in BB Canada history. So there definitely needs to be some progress there. So I will most definitely be covering bisexual women next, or pansexual women as well, included in that. And I believe there's enough in BBUSA where I should only talk about the bisexual slash pansexual women in BBUSA, and the ones in Canada will be a different video. So thank you all for following me on this journey. I'm going to continue posting videos regarding the series, and expect a Total Drama Reboot Season 2 video to be out very soon. So thank you all. You can like, subscribe, follow me, all that jazz. Bye!